in an airplane and suddenly you find that the first class is open and they let you go forward.
They don't.
Let's begin with a word of prayer. Dear God, we give you thanks for the week you have given us. No doubt we have had many trials and difficulties, both personally and among those we love. We thank you that your grace has been with us throughout. We thank you for the space and the time you've given us to be around other Christian friends and feel their support and their love. And we pray for your constant openness as we learn more about it. In the name of your Son, we pray. Amen. Come on in. Let's kind of scoot around. John, maybe you can pull one more up in the beginning there. You can probably get one more chair. Okay. So today we're going to be looking at Christ the King. Next week is going to be the last week of the series. We're going to be looking at the cosmic Christ, which is going to be looking at Christ as a figure that is not only related to historical Jesus or even limited to the Christian faith, but the Christ that ties up, you might say, all the loose ends of creation. So this really big cosmic view. Today we want to look at Christ the King, and I was a little unsure about the direction I took on this topic, and we'll see if you all are interested in going with me on this. I wanted to take advantage of this great opportunity we have, that we have a whole class here. It comes from different countries and different cultures, and we're all living here in Japan. And we've been Christians in different places, and now many of us are Christians in please come on in, Naomi. Do you want to scoot one in right there? Yeah, come on over there so you can see. We'll get you right in there. You have to kind of look past me. Maybe we can get you in right there.
I think this is space. Just stay where you are.
Can you see by me, okay? When we start thinking about Christ as King, now this particular image is from Russian.
Where is this image from?
This is from a Russian Orthodox cathedral. I wasn't able to find which one it is from, but this is fairly typical. If you go to an Orthodox church, you will usually find an image of Christ the King. Usually, if the church is built in a cruciform form, there is a dome in the middle, and you'll find Christ the King up above. If it's not a cruciform, it'll be up in the top, in the sanctuary part, and that's where this one would be, up in the very front. So this image is central in the Orthodox faith. Now, the halo around the head signifies that this is Christ. It's in Greek, it's called Pantokrator, which is the ruler of everything, right? So the emperor, so to speak, the emperor of everything. And then the sign here in his hands is a sign of blessing. Now, we don't have this image, right, in our own churches. How would you feel about, what's your comfort level on this kind of image? I mean, it's obviously beautiful, right, and imposing. What do you think it's meant to create? What's the feeling that is intended with this?
Submitted to worship?
It's definitely Christ is up there as a powerful figure.
He looks powerful and he looks intelligent and revere too.
Certainly one to revere, right?
He looks like he has empathy.
The face is interesting, right? This is not necessarily a stern king, right? But a king with compassion, maybe as well, right? Maybe a more benevolent ruler.
Concerning some of the figures in the Buddhist division, they're fearful, scary type images.
And in some of them, you have Jesus, the Buddha, who's compassionate, right? And gentle. It depends on the circumstances there. I'm going to come off in a kind of an odd direction here at first, but again, we'll see how far you want to go with me. Christ is where our loyalty goes, right? It's a question of our devotion and loyalty. And the question immediately comes, what about if Christ is my king, how do I live in this other world? What kind of loyalty do I give other things in this world? Now, are those competitive relationships? Are they complementary? If I give loyalty to Christ, do I need to give less loyalty to other things? When might they conflict with each other? Now, that question runs all the way through the New Testament in two different ways. One of them I'm going to look at today, one of them I'm not. If you read the Gospel of Luke, you will find constantly through the Gospel of Luke that Jesus and loyalty to Jesus and being disciple of Jesus is pitted against loyalty to family. That Jesus is constantly saying, oh, my true family are the ones that do the will of God. Jesus' own mother and brothers come to see him, and Jesus says, I don't have time for them. I only have time for the ones who are giving loyalty to God. Now, why can you imagine that in the Gospel of Luke, being a disciple of Jesus versus family, and these things are seen as conflicts? Why can you imagine that people would be feeling conflict?
I think it's about the inner and the exterior life, because what Jesus does is he says, it was said of old that these rules apply, but I tell you, if
I tell you.
own. And so family stands for exterior cultural assessments, automatic reaction. And he says you need to go way deeper into yourself.
Into yourself, right? And this is something new.
It's
Now,
new, yeah.
now we do know, right, what was going on socially at the time is that as people began to follow Jesus, their families were not too happy about it. And for many of them, they had to make decisions, right? If you've got a traditional Jewish family and you begin to follow Jesus, who is this wandering, itinerant, penniless prophet, right? That created a problem. When we move off into the era of the New Testament, remember after the temple was destroyed is when the Gospels were written. Christians are beginning to be persecuted at that time. And people are feeling a real pull because not being part of the family meant not worshiping the family gods, which was really a deep kind of disloyalty. Now, in the ancient world, family is everything. You only have a place insofar as you have a family. If you become family-less, you just don't have anything socially to hold you together, right? And so this was a difficult decision for people to do. And in Luke, it's pretty clear. Just read the Gospel of Luke with an open mind to that question, and you're going to see just again and again and again, whenever Jesus mentions family, it's in a negative sense. When I first started coming to Japan 35 years ago, my wife's church was full of people who had been kicked out of their families by being Christian. Is that part of your experience when you first came? You've seen that? Have any of you experienced that from, is it still that way? Maybe families are less or more tolerant now?
Not as interested, perhaps. Perhaps not as interested.
Not as interested, one way or another, yeah. So one way we could be looking at this is loyalty to Christ the King versus family. That's not the direction I wanted to go, though. I'm going to want to flag that that's there. I wanted to flag with an issue that has become deeper and much more omnipresent throughout Christian history and today, and that is, what about my loyalty to the political world around me? Okay? And that's been an ongoing difficulty and struggle. You know, why? To be a Christian is to live in a distinctive way. Right? As we'll talk about in just a moment about how distinctive that way of life is. This is not the way that governments are set up. Right? I mean, right now I'm looking at my country back home, which is literally bombing the hell out of another place for not apparently any good reason. And hard to reconcile that with any kind of Christian belief. And this is constantly the place we're put in, trying to live in a public world. Are you okay going in this direction? Okay. Now, this actually is my specialty in academics, is writing about Christian faith and politics, Christian faith and political life. I put 2 readings up online for you of essays I wrote, just in case you want to read more. One of them is an introduction historically to Christian faith and political life, and the other is dealing specifically with the area of violence and how Christians can or can't make their accommodation with the state that uses violence. So there's 2 short essays on there.
Where are they?
They're on the Google Drive page along with the presentations. That's only if you're interested in that. Okay. They both come out of the textbook in Christian ethics that I wrote with a Catholic co-author. So they're there. Okay. So, Christ the King, ironies. We're going to be talking about that, dangers, and also some possibilities. Now, this is a scene out of a typical sort of American congregation. The places where I was a pastor were set up very similar to this. Does this look familiar?
Not in Baptist church. Is this a Methodist church?
No, it doesn't look like
This is
Oh, it doesn't? Oh, I have no idea, I never.
this is Methodist, but what's conspicuous here?
The Austrian
American
flag.
flag.
Oh, it's the American flag.
The American flag,
I
right?
know that one.
Is that almost all American churches have an American flag right up there at the front. And it puts, as a pastor, right, everybody goes into the church and you think, oh my gosh, is this a battle I want to have with my congregation or not? And I've had a good friend that insisted that the flag be removed, and he could never recover his relationship with that congregation. I had another friend, very smart friend, who moved the flag 1 foot every week. And after about a year, he worked it out into the foyer, right? And he managed to get away with it.
I wonder, do Catholic churches in America have a flag too?
They also do. Some, yes.
I'm not trying to interrupt you.
No.
Do you know when that practice started?
Certainly after the Second World War, it began to be a sign of Christianity, Christian civilization against godless communism.
Oh.
So certainly after the Second World War it began. Is this, I was going to ask those of you in other places, are your national flags placed anywhere?
Not in Austria, no.
You know, not in Austria.
Is
Too
there a flag
many
show?
bad memories, right? They go
Outside of the church precincts, not inside.
not inside. In
Oh,
Canada,
Christmas
is
with
it?
the grass too?
The
Or
whole,
they can't remember.
inside, once you enter the church, there's.
Well, it's quite a question to me, right? It makes me uncomfortable. A little too close putting the state and the government with the pulpit, right? I get very uncomfortable with that. So, if Christ is, yeah,
But then when you start going to church, the flag's already there, right? Like
Already
you
there.
should get used to that, right?
I just sort of ignore it. And I try to, when I would preach, I would try to kind of broaden people's perspectives without, they talk about keeping people in a teachable moment. If you alienate people too much, they stop hearing you. And so you've got to just nudge them along sort of carefully, but
Like the guy with the flag.
So in those days, in the 50s, late 50s, many American institutions always
had flags.
pledge allegiance to this flag of the United States of
Yeah.
America.
Right, we're going to talk about that, right, in just a moment, about pledge and allegiance. So, how much loyalty, yeah.
Sorry. So does having the flag there impact how one would preach? So let's just say Memorial, quote unquote, Memorial Day falls on a Sunday. Does it impact how one would preach in America?
My church was pretty unhappy with me because I did not sing patriotic songs on July 4th or Memorial Day. And they had their own meeting later, to sing the songs. They were not happy with me for that. So, but I lived in the South, small town in the South, and very patriotic, and a lot of the men go into the military, and it was just like Texas, right? So, it's just a different environment. insisted that the flag come down, and he had a big war with his congregation about it. And he stayed at that congregation 6 more years, and when he was getting ready to leave, they had a big party for him, and everybody was telling stories. And he said, well, you know, we got off to a rocky start, but I'm glad you listened to me about the flag. And everybody got silent. And then they said, well, should we tell him? They said, okay, we'll tell him. And they brought him into the sanctuary. And soon after they got rid of the flag, the women of the church had made this enormous liturgical banner that was hung up behind for all seasons. And they flipped it around, and sewn into the back was a flag. So everyone in that church, every week but him, knew that there was a flag up there. And so the power of this as a totem symbol, you know, we talk about in sociology, of it was so important to them. Now, I've never seen a church that can keep a secret about anything, right? But it was so important they kept a secret for 6 years from the pastor about this. Okay.
It's not always the flag, right? I was in a church, and in the altar in the middle, the most space was used by the choir. The choir. So there was, the pastor came up to preach, but the sanctuary was filled during the service with all the choir members,
Right.
all the time.
Yeah, in the back.
That's a similar, it's not as strong, but it's a, so.
The flag would be there in America off to the side, though, for sure. Yeah. So that, you know, I'm asking this question starting as an American, where this is a real issue. I don't know where you are. It's probably something where you think about less. Oh, I'm Japanese. When does my citizenship in Japan conflict with my Christianity? I'm Canadian. Do you feel the tension? Right? Where is it? So let's get into this. So, if I'm a Christian, if Christ is my king, could I serve in the military or in the police force? Can you think about why that may be a question? Jesus says what about violence?
Do not kill.
Do not kill, right? So can I, yeah.
But that is the assumption that military or police has on its front agenda to kill. Like there is police forces, I think there's no problem as a Christian to join. And that the police here is basically going around and helping people to fight that part. But if it's the police for like ICE, ICE is not compatible for me with a Christian view because they focus on that part of policing or military that's it's not good. So I think it's a category error. It's not the thing. It's how the thing is
The
done.
odds are, if you're a police officer in America, you're going to be taking your weapon out a couple times a week.
Really.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a brother-in-law who's a police officer in Atlanta, and he's killed two people in his career.
Wait for the question. Can you avoid gun? Just
America is a violent place, right? If you're in the American military, if you're in Japanese military, you may go your whole career and never fire a shot. If you're an American military, you're going to go through some conflicts, right?
Depends on what your field is too.
Well, the question would be, I'm materially cooperating, right? I might not be pulling the trigger, but I'm sending information about a missile site or something like that. Cooperating.
I wonder how the chaplains feel.
Yeah, I have friends who are chaplains, and they wrestle with this a lot, especially when you're in a war that probably doesn't pass the conditions of any kind of just war. It's a real tension. As far as the military is concerned, chaplains are considered morale officers. They're to enable soldiers to fight, and it's a real role conflict for them. What about, can I run for a political office? Why would this be an issue?
I think the rule of the game is quite different. Like normal business, commercial setting. And behind the scene, lots of things happen that maybe go against
forcing people to do things, right, that you and I can't. And even taking away life, right? The state can perform capital punishment, I can't as a private citizen. State laws are intended to force people to do things that they would not do otherwise. That's why we have them. So this coercive, possibly violent life that the states have, it at least raises questions, right? Now, Christians have answered this in lots of different ways we'll get to in the end. What about even voting? Can I participate at all? Some Christians have said no. Most Christians have said I can at least vote.
But for 2 and 3 I'm yes, so
Mm.
and of course I support. I need to go. That's my way of bringing Christian thought
Yeah.
or thinking into
Right.
community life.
Right. And most Christians have ended up there, right? If I want to participate somehow, at least choosing the lesser evil, if nothing else, right? At least, but some Christians don't. We'll talk about that. May I use the court system? Jesus in his teaching said no. We'll get into that in a moment. I have good friends. My best friend is a Mennonite, and in America, they don't use the court system at all because it's coercive and it's, my good friend's wife was bit by a dog, and in America, that's probably in Japan too, right? That can go to the courts. And she just told the owner, I'm not going to sue you. We don't do that. If you would like to pay for my medical bills, that would be nice, but I'm not going to force you to. And they felt as Mennonites that was what they needed to do.
I think it's again case by case. I
Case
think
by
of
case.
course the court system can. The law is about justice, so it is not justice, but it is about justice.
If I'm Japanese, may I celebrate the birthday of the emperor?
Yes.
Many people struggle with that. Yeah,
What's the struggle?
because in the history, the church made the congregation to worship the emperor.
Right. So this is a slope we're not sure we want to go down this direction. Right? And it depends on which emperor, right? If it was one associated too closely with the war, maybe some persons are not as happy about it. I'm not answering these questions. These are just the questions that start coming out, right? And then one you had brought up, brought this up about pledge. John, did you bring that up? Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, yeah.
In America, I don't know if children still do this, but all the time I grew up, we started our day putting our hand on our heart, facing the flag, and I
We
pledge
should do that
allegiance to the
every morning,
flag.
ASJ.
Right. So, I remember President Obama was criticized because he didn't put his hand on his heart when he said the pledge, and people on the right were very upset with him about not doing that. As a Christian, that makes me a little, do I face a flag and pledge loyalty? There's probably nothing similar to this in other places, right? There's no pledge. Is there? Do you pledge to loyalty to Japan?
I think if you are non-Austrian, you want to become Austrian at that point.
At that
you
point.
have to do, but not otherwise.
Canadians don't have something like this, I think.
No.
You single Canada, but it's not really a very patriotic song.
In Westworld,
Yeah.
actually, we had no high respect for the Republic.
In his cabinet meetings, the Japanese Prime Minister always follows towards the Japanese flag.
Oh, they do?
They do that, yeah. And there were some who didn't, and they had a problem.
Okay, so similar, right? Yeah, so, how much, this is a bigger question, how much do I have hope that my government will even be good and just? Or is it just a bunch of collective self-interest? I had some hopes years ago that maybe the government can sometimes be good. I've kind of lost hope in that in recent years. But how much hope do we even have?
I think that's the point. I grew up after World War II. last 20 years, it's a joke. I mean, what they say and do is not consistent. I mean, it's self-interest. It's a cultural change that's happening.
Yeah.
And now I would say no, but when I grew up, of course, I was very much in support of
Okay, so these are all kind of background questions to struggle with a little bit. I'm going to go through some stuff in the New Testament and then the history, and then we'll kind of get back to some of these issues at the end. So, oops, that complicated diagram up there I'm not going to go into now, but it was just to say there, in any society, right, you've got a sphere of law, you have a sphere of religion, you have a sphere of morality, and those intersect, and they have tensions between them. But that's a complicated thing, I won't go into that, but it's there if you want to look at it. Okay, New Testament, Christ is King. So, this is actually out of a cathedral of Christ at the Last Judgment, and he's judging between the sheep and the goats, right? So he's coming with the angels at the end. Now that fits in Christ as Messiah. Messiah, for most Jews, was a political figure. That's what they expected. So out of Isaiah, for example, they're hoping for a Messiah. The increase of his government and peace, there will be no end. On the throne of David over his kingdom to establish and hold it with justice and righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. So Old Testament ideas about Messiah, who is it? It's a just, righteous king that will finally rule justly and have God illuminating this person to rule justly. So very much a political figure. We've talked about the Essenes, that group out in the Dead Sea, that were a monastic group, and they were, if you remember, praying for a Messiah to come, and the angels would come in on his side with the swords and kill all the Romans. And we remember what happened to them. They went to war with the Romans in a rebellion, and every one of them were killed. Now, here's another interesting thing. Jesus seemed to have in his disciples two either zealots or former zealots. Now, these would be guerrilla fighters working against Rome. So one of them is called Simon the Zealot.
Right.
So Simon the guerrilla fighter. And then the other one, Judas Iscariot, is not his name. He's a member of a group. Judas the Iscariot. And the Sicarii, that's literally the daggermen. And these Sicarii would have, at night, maybe snuck up on a Roman sentry and stuck him with a knife. Now, apparently, these people that maybe originally saw Jesus as somebody who was going to rattle things and shake them up, and maybe he's the Messiah. Did they give up on their guerrilla warfare tactics and then become Christians? Did they follow Jesus hoping he would be that kind of figure? Did even Judas perhaps turn on Jesus because he turned out not to be this kind of violent figure? We don't know, right? We just simply don't know. But there was a lot of hopes that Jesus would be this Messiah who would rule politically and use the power of God violently to put down their enemies. So that's the expectation. Now, Jesus turned out not to be that at all. I absolutely love this painting. This is by Ilya Repin. This is oil done mostly with palette knife. But this is, Jesus is out in the wilderness and he's being tempted by Satan. And so this is Jesus on the left and he's struggling with Satan here on the right. Now here is one of these right out of Luke. So he's out in the wilderness, 40 days, 40 nights. Devil takes him to a high place and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and says, I will give you authority and splendor. It's been given to me and I can give it to anyone I want to. If you worship me, it'll be yours. Jesus answers, it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. So Jesus is consciously rejecting this political role here. Even more to the case, right? So if you look at Jesus' teaching, Sermon on the Mount, for example, Jesus is pretty clear that he is rejecting violence. So I'd like to, this is a passage you probably all know. eye for an eye, this passage. I'd like to go into this a little bit, because there's some nuances you may not know exactly. You've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Now, what does that mean? Old Testament, this is a passage in Leviticus that is meant to limit violence. So, if we're fighting with each other,
Only one eye.
right,
No, seriously, I mean,
Yeah.
that was
Not to
something
go
that used to be,
beyond.
right?
right. So if we're fighting with each other and I knock out your tooth, your family now is honor bound, right, to come and do the same to me. And if you knock out all my teeth, then my family is going to come and try to get more vengeance on you, right? So an eye for an eye is limit the punishment to fit the crime. Now, by the time of Jesus, people were not having their eyes knocked out and teeth knocked out. It was a system largely monetary, right? If you caused this harm, this payment will be, and it's to be just. Okay, so I cause an injury to your cow. I've got to pay something. If the cow dies, I have to pay more. If I killed one of your children, I have to pay a lot more, right? And so this system is not that different from the justice system we have now, right? You commit a certain crime, you do a certain harm, you pay back a certain amount. But I say to you, don't resist an evil person. Somebody knocks my tooth out. Don't. Okay. Now, next one. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other also. Now, if I am in confrontation with someone and I slap them on the right cheek, I have to do this.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Okay. We won't
If I'm
cry.
right-handed, how do I hit my right cheek? This way, right? So this is what?
Slap for an inferior.
Inferior, right? This is slapping somebody who's inferior, right? If we're
That's what
equals,
you
I
said.
couldn't do this.
No.
But if you are a slave, a servant beneath me, I can slap you. Okay, thank you. So I'm not going to actually slap you. So a lot of Jesus' hearers are on the bottom end. They've been slapped. And so what do? Well, you turn the other cheek, which is,
No, then you make the other equal, right?
well, it's a question,
If
right?
he hits.
If you slapped me, okay, go ahead and hit me. You can read this a couple of ways, right? One of them, you're putting shame back on this other person, right? If you're going to do that, then you have to. Is it treat me like an equal and hit me, or is it make you act out the violence that you feel? Right? But it's turning it back on that person. Okay, next one. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, now who would force you to go a mile?
Soldier, the Roman
Soldiers, right? So that was the Roman law, that if the soldiers are walking from one garrison to the other with their heavy packs, they can turn you around on the road, put the pack on you, and force you to go, it's 1 stadia, which is a little more than a kilometer. And they can, by law, they can make you do that. Now imagine you're out walking on the road, you see Roman soldiers coming up, right? They put this pack that's about 60 pounds, so a pretty heavy pack, on you, turn you around, and make you go 1 stadia by law. You're counting steps, you get to the next stadia marker. They're expecting you to throw it down and walk off. Instead, keep walking. What an odd bit of advice. What do you make of that?
Now the soldier feels bad.
What's a soldier do? I can compel you to go 1 mile. You've gone the next on your own volition. You know, these are kind of an interesting kind of jujitsu, right? They're kind of restoring honor and dignity to the person who's the victim without becoming violent. And they're rejecting competition, hierarchy, retribution when needed, right? Very strong values, and you can instantly see the collision that's coming here. So, questions of loyalty came. This is a Roman coin of Augustus. On the back, this is Athena, who the Caesar family said they were descended from Athena. And it's, in Latin, is Caesar, Devi, and then the F is Filius. So, Caesar, son of God. Augustus started using the title son of God, and then all of the Roman emperors after this just took the title son of God. So for Christians to use this title was a very direct sense of competition, right? If I'm saying Jesus is the Son of God, the society is used to hearing, oh, the emperor is the Son of God. Think about in Japan, to say, during the height of Shinto, when the emperor is the one who's the Son of Heaven, if you use that title for Jesus, maybe this is something that is problematic at that time. So a similar kind of thing. We can see this conflict set up in Luke in particular. During the Passover, there are two entrances into Jerusalem. We're going to be getting into this week, right? So Rome is stationed up here, Caesarea Maritima, a really nice city. This is where Pontius Pilate hung out. But during the Passover, he made a long trip with 1,000 soldiers and entered into the west gate like this. So he rode in on a big white horse. He had 1,000 legionnaires with him, and it was meant to impress everyone during the Passover. Don't get out of line because we'll crush you. Okay. At the same time, we have Jesus coming in the opposite gate, riding on a donkey. And Luke is setting this up as an opposition, right, of values and images. One, power, might, authority, vengeance. The other, a kind of humility is kind of okay. Now, all this came together, right, at judgment. Are you a king or are you not a king? Some of the Gospels, Jesus doesn't answer the question. In John, he says, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders, but now my kingdom is from another place. Oh, so you're a king, says Pilate. You say I'm a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world was to testify to the truth. And then Pilate's going, what is truth? Truth is what we make it, right? Powerful people create the truth. Now, where that ended, right, we all know, is this crucifixion. Only one crime in Rome got you crucified. If you kill somebody else, you could be flogged, you could be sent as a slave on the galleys. Only one crime was punished by crucifixion, and that was sedition. If the Romans thought you were leading a movement against Rome as a revolutionary, you would be crucified as an example. So the Romans somehow thought that Jesus was a threat. Mistakenly or not. Jesus wasn't certainly not a revolutionary threat. His values, antithetical to Roman values, right? So there was very much this rejection of that. And then on the cross is this King of the Jews as a warning, right? So this is your king, this is what happens to kings. But it set this up anyway, a real tension with Rome. Okay. Now, as the Christian history starts, remember now, early Christians are being hounded by the temple, who were pretty unhappy with them. And later on, when Christians, after the war in Jerusalem, they lost their legal status of toleration, and Christians began to go through this long history of sometimes being left at peace, sometimes persecuted. But really, the next 2.5 centuries of Christians being this movement that was sometimes oppressed, sometimes not, but never accepted by the Roman society. So it's a long history for the next 200 years of martyrdom. So there are stories, I could pick 1,000 martyrs, but here's one. This is Polycarp. This is out of a stained glass window. Did I not write down? This is from an Episcopal church in the U.S., but this is the martyrdom of Polycarp. The legend says that the flames were lit around him and it didn't consume his body. So you can see this angry executioner over here. And so they just wound up hitting him with a spear instead. But in any case, Polycarp, he's in the 2nd century, so still a lot of martyrdoms going on there. This Tertullian, Bishop of Rome, also martyred. And he wrote a book called The Apology, that he's talking about how Christians relate to the Roman Empire. And there's some parts I want to read here that ask you, how much is it still true in your sense about being a Christian in Japan, in America, in wherever it is you live? Okay. Because Christians are not born, they're made. Now that is a huge difference, right? Normally our identity comes from our family we're born into or a country we're born into. This is a creation of a third race based not on birth, not based on genetics, but based on a voluntary commitment to become a Christian. So this is, as far as I can tell, this is the first time that groups like this existed in large numbers, of being a voluntary association. Leaving their family, leaving their state, and forming something different by voluntary. In his writings, he says, right, the Caesars would have believed in Christ if Christians could have been Caesars. Now, the next one, this is out of the Apology. Christians, he says, are indistinguishable from other people, either by nationality, language, or customs. And yet, there is something extraordinary about their lives. They live in their own countries as though they were only passing through. They play their full role as citizens, but labor under all the disabilities of aliens. Right? We're a citizen in our country, but we're really treated like aliens. Any country can be their homeland. It can be at home anywhere. But for them, their homeland, wherever it may be, is a foreign country. This is a passage I think about a lot as I'm at TUC. That everybody here is a kind of a sojourner in our own way, right? Some of us have left home to be here. Some of you who are Japanese feel like you've left some things about your own culture in order to be here. We're all kind of aliens in our own way, but also have a freedom of not being loyal to any one particular place. Do you feel this at all? Is this you?
Yes, but I interpret this much more as an interior thing. Like interiorly, I'm myself. If I'm only driven by my government, by all exterior things, then I may be a citizen of a country. Even being in Austria, I do things differently to other citizens, other Christian, whatever. So I see it as like the kingdom of heaven is inside you. That's the other country I'm striving for. So it's not exterior, but that doesn't come out in this text very strongly.
Right, I don't feel at home in the U.S. completely. this sense of finding a companionship with each other where we don't feel it maybe outside. My wife and I went through this thing not long ago where we were doing our will and we had to decide where we were going to be buried. And we just couldn't figure it out. I don't know if any of you had that issue before.
For me, my wife is Japanese, so her hometown is essentially outside Tokyo. It seems like the family, they have their place. So it seems like I have a place there. They reserve for me in case I die. So, yeah.
So you're going to be buried outside your homeland.
Yeah, yeah, but I guess it's okay, right?
My husband has a graveyard, but their family has a graveyard. But my husband himself doesn't want to be putting there, so I don't know what I'm going to do.
And for some of you, maybe your family grave area is a different religion, right? John's that case, right? It's a Buddhist place. You've kind of reconciled yourself about you're going to go ahead and be there in that place.
That's right.
Yeah.
You see it.
Yeah. So that's sort of feeling at home, not at home, right? Very much part of the life. So, I'm going slow. Turning point in the church is the Emperor Constantine. So a lot of you know already Constantine's story, right? The church is persecuted, they're pushed on the outside, and then all at once, there's a civil war going on between different generals, and Constantine, suddenly, he says, has a vision of painting the cross on the shields of all of his soldiers and going to war on the Christian side. And so the dream was in hoc signo vinces, which means in this sign conquer. Now he did go on at the Milvian Bridge, won a spectacular victory and became emperor of Rome. The irony of this, okay, on the cross was where the Romans executed Jesus. And now the cross becomes the sign by which they slay other people. I mean, you can't make that up, right? Of just the incredible irony of that. But it puts the church in an interesting position. So imagine, if you're Japanese, back in, say, Tokugawa era, when the church is under some persecution, and yet there are some Christian daimyo out there. Now imagine one of them becomes shogun and decides to make Christianity tolerated across Japan. Would the church say, yay? Would you be happy with the shogun, with the new shogun fighting in the name of Jesus? He says, I'm going to build all these churches for you. And then a few years later,
It's the birth of Christian nationalism.
yeah, there we go, see, right? So, this is a medallion from the time of, this is Constantine, and he's getting his crown directly from heaven. Okay, so you see pretty quickly how this goes. And this is the Council of Nicaea, where we have the Nicene Creed. Constantine was sitting there, passing judgment. No, not this doctrine. We better go with this one, right? And so he's already beginning to impose. And he called himself Famulus Dei, which is just simply follower of God, fairly innocuous, but also, I'm the 13th apostle. And he also called himself Bishop of the Exterior, means I'm the bishop of everything outside the church. He took on the title of bishop. So imagine now you have a Christian shogun who says, I'm also the Pope here in Japan, I'm a bishop here in Japan, and within a few years, outlaws all other religions. Buddhism, gone. State Shinto, gone. Only Christians. Good thing?
Should we then continue to recite the Nicene Creed?
Well, if you're struggling, persecuted church, it's hard to turn this down.
Yeah, I get it.
Instead of killing you, I think I'm going to instead build beautiful churches and build beautiful monasteries and create treasures in the churches and give you preferred status.
That's what Constantine did, you're saying?
And that's what Constantine did, right? And so this is the beginning of the Holy Roman Emperor, Holy Roman Empire at this point. In Japan, what do you think? If you were offered, do you think the churches would have taken it? I think they would have. Probably hard to turn it down. Okay. Now here's the other side. I had promised, some of you have seen this and wondered. So it sets up, Peter set me up beautifully, right at the beginning of political idolatry. If the emperor, if the empire is identified with God, are there any dangers with that? I've given you some examples here. This is World War II, American. Private Joe Lewis says, we're going to do our part and we'll win because we're on God's side. That was actually one of the more mild ones that I found. This one, right, we have a GI carrying crosses, symbolically taking on the role of Jesus, right? By war bonds, we have a soldier, right, who's in the place of Jesus. It became very clear in Germany, where the Nazi Party was very quickly brought in to be merged in with the Christian state. This is an altar, right, where we've got the cross and we have Hakenkreuz up here, right, alongside it. Now, it wasn't a complete victory. There were lots of pastors who resisted this throughout, some of them jailed, but increasing pressure was put on to bring this merging of Nazism and Christianity. Here's just an early propaganda one. Peter, what's this one about?
Which one?
The one on the left.
Uh,
So this was actually from a revolt. There were 300 Nazi party members who were killed in a riot. And so these 300 died for you. Yep. And the Nazi symbol, connected with the cross. So very much putting them together. Well, what about Japan? Did we have a merging of government and religion?
To me, it's interesting, your father-in-law, his own story,
Yeah.
and how he decided to go the way he went because of what he was forced to do, yeah.
My father-in-law was in military school, too young to be on the front lines, but a cadet, and very much into the emperor worship part of his life. And he was stationed on the outer part of Tokyo with a machine gun. And his role was to not be there to kill Americans, but be there to shoot Japanese if they refused to throw themselves on the Americans when they came. And he saw Tokyo burning around behind him and everything crashed, and he wound up converting to Christianity out of all of that. And became actually very, very critical of the emperor system after that. Changed. This one is what? This came out during the wartime. This is Amaterasu, right here on this side, the sun god, and then the emperor is included in this kind of
divine
thing.
right.
That's there. Yeah. This one is from Iraq War. Everything I needed to know about Islam I learned on 9/11, so you had a lot of very anti-Islam stuff that came out in 9/11. Now I have to admit this next one kind of turns my stomach a little bit. There is a resurgent Christian nationalism in America right now, that America should be a Christian nation only. All others should be excluded. Trump is the chosen one, honestly. This has actually gotten fairly big in conservative Christianity here. This one just makes me laugh out loud, right? There's probably never been a more morally bankrupt person than this, but he's doing the will of God. Jesus is my Savior, Trump is my president. Okay. All right. So the dangers. Well, where do we go from this? There have been a options about how to work this out. I'll quickly go over these and then we'll talk in just a minute about where you think you are on this. One, these are going to go from most critical of the state to most accepting of the state, right? My friends Mennonites are here. The state is by nature coercive and violent. Christians are called to be peaceful and loving, and that we must remove ourselves completely from civil society. So a lot of Mennonites live on farms. They don't interact with anyone else. They don't vote. They don't pay taxes. My friends are Mennonite. New Order Mennonite means that they participate, but they will never go into the military or the police. They won't go use the courts. They do vote, sort of to pick the least of the bad, when they vote. But they're very clear that they stand apart. There are some churchless protest movements, like civil rights movement, where they don't want political power, but they want to try to change society, right, by bringing in Christian values. But Martin Luther King never wanted to be president. Right? He has always kind of changed from outside. Okay, this is where a lot of us are. We just decide, well, religion, that's a private matter. In political life, I just try to seek out consensus with other people. We can agree on some very broad principles. Christians want peace. We'll try to work with other people who want peace. Christians want to take care of the sick. We'll work with some other people who want to take care of the sick. And so I can run for office and I can work on these things as much as I can. I think a lot of us are probably here. You see, is this dissatisfying in some ways? I'm certainly,
Well, religion, spirituality is another question too.
it's kind of, is my faith just private? You know, it seems like it needs to grow out of that private realm, right? So it's got its own problems. This is the Lutheran position, classical Lutheran position, which is on a Christian level, right? I seek nonviolence and peace, but when I'm working for the state, I don't seek nonviolence and peace and love. I seek justice. So, you know, I'm kind of 10 Commandments here, and I'm Sermon on the Mount here. And these are two different spheres. They're cooperative. So if I'm a politician or I'm a policeman, I have two selves. When I'm with my family, when I'm in private life, I'm loving, I'm nonviolent. When I put on the uniform, I forget about that and I take on the role of justice. Does this solve an issue for you? Next one. This was the position Calvin took. Church and state have different jurisdictions, but they ideally should be able to cooperate. And that you can have a good government that supports the church, and the church helps make the government more loving and just to some point. So think about Puritan society, for example, that tried to do this. Geneva tried to do this. The assumption is that government can be lifted up and be made better, and then but also government should have the role of supporting the church, Christian people. This probably was early on very influential in the United States. I don't think, probably some still want this. And then the last one is the empire, right? Ideal is a unified state with an established church. So the emperor unifies the government, the church unifies worship, and the two are very closely synonymous with each other. And this is still the case this is the ideal of the Orthodox in particular, still. The question is, do they allow dissent or not? In most places, right, will at least allow dissenters, but we don't give them full rights. Okay, do you find we gotta go, but do you find yourself comfort with any of these? How you draw this out and where you plan?
More secular compromise.
The secular compromise?
Yeah.
Yeah. What draws you to that?
I guess It's just, you don't go too extreme on this side. The whole culture of this country is going together, compromise.
So particularly when the church is in a small minority, right, you can't expect the church to have a huge impact on the values that are there, and you have to pick your battles and pick your alliances and be pragmatic about it.
Yeah.
You know. The question is different when you're in church is in a minority position than when they're in a majority position. In some ways, temptation is greater, right, in the South in America where everybody's Christian. You know, this is the temptation.
They say the church in the South is falling apart.
It is, right. It is falling apart, partly because overreach. Younger people do not,
Younger people don't want to go.
they don't want to go that far, right? And so there's been a lot of dissent. Okay. This was a way of raising a question that maybe in the back of your minds, I hope gives some opportunity to think a little more and clarify as you go back. I hope I didn't push you too far on this, on where you didn't want to go. Okay. Next week, we're